Welcome to The Drop, the official podcast of the 130th Airlift Wing. I'm Master Sergeant Eugene Christ, a public affairs specialist with the 130th Airlift Wing. One of the missions of The Drop is to highlight unique stories of our unit members. We are a unit with members who have diverse backgrounds and life experiences. So it is our goal to tell these stories of how these incredible individuals became a part of our unit. With me today is one such individual, Staff Sgt. Kyle McCormick, a defender assigned to the 130th Security Forces Squadron. Thank you for being on the show today, Sergeant McCormick.
Thanks for having me.
So what I'd like to start with today is, can you tell us a little bit about your job and some of your background, not only as a air guardsman, but also in your civilian job?
Yeah, so some of the primary roles of Security Forces member on this installation and active duty in general is basically providing the security and safety to effectively complete the mission. With Security Forces, we are responsible for base defense and ensuring that no unauthorized people get access to the installation or to some of our more secure resources. Another one of our duties is providing safety and security for the members here on base, making sure that people come here and they feel safe. They know that there is a response force if something goes wrong. And basically that's providing basic security services is what we do. My background is whenever I was growing up, after I graduated basic training in tech school, I became a police officer with the New Haven Police Department in Mason County, West Virginia. Graduated the Basic Police Academy and from the West Virginia State Police Academy. And from there, I worked in New Haven for about 2 years. And then later on, I moved into Mason City, where I worked for an additional year to 2 years. During that time, I deployed to the United Arab Emirates in 2014 and got a bigger, more holistic taste of what Security Forces really is, and giving protection to larger assets and security. And from then on, I got a full-time job here at the base, where I am actually a full-time AGR or active guard reservist here. And I just really love this job. This is probably the best job I've had. It lets you expand your career field and what your primary roles and responsibilities are. And it also gives you a more holistic view of what it means to be an Air National Guardsman. And for me, an NCO, it lets you really get a full grasp on everything instead of just a part-time approach to, just coming up here one weekend a month.
Sure.
So
not to put the best part up front, but can we talk a little bit about the pressures of a guardsman? And I know specifically we're going to talk about, some of the your resiliency story, but talk to me a little bit about how being a Security Forces member, some of those pressures that are specific to that career field.
So sure, like I said at the beginning, some of the pressures is basically like you are that first line of defense. You are there to make sure that nobody that's not supposed to be on this base gets on the base. And you are there to make sure that the fence line is secure.
Sure.
One of the roles and responsibilities that we have to do is we have to do perimeter fence line checks. So we physically have to walk around fence lines, which includes up here on the hill, back behind the bushes and everything else. And, I've slipped and busted my butt a couple times going through there. So, that can be a little bit stressful, but you have to do it. You have to be resilient to different changing weather circumstances. You have to be able to do this stuff in the rain, cold, sleet and snow, like all day, every day. You have to be ready for that. And just going off of that perspective, like with the aircraft and everything else, we have to sit there and watch, 8 hours a day. And sometimes it's not the the funnest thing to do.
Sure.
And it gets boring, but you have to keep in the back of your mind, like, this is why the reason why we're here is to make sure that these guys are taken off safely, is to make sure that these resources are defended and that people are able to do their mission effectively. So those are just a couple of the stressors that come with the job. And then being, if you get tasked to be an emergency operations controller or ECC controller, you have to be able to dispatch forces appropriately. You have to know or be familiar with some of the quick reaction checklists for different instances. You have to be able to coordinate with other departments and agencies on base and off base for different instances. You have to be able to respond quickly and timely and effectively to different scenarios. And then as you go through your career and you develop into an NCO, you get tasked with the responsibility of being a flight chief. And now you're responsible for the entire shift. Everything that goes on that day, it's on you. So you have to make sure that you're educated in how to fill out forms, how to respond to different situations, and how to effectively manage people and resolve issues. So
sure. And all of this while trying to manage your own personal life and existing every day in this crazy 2020 that we're living in.
Yeah. It's almost like one of the things that I usually do is, and a lot of people talk about separating your home life from your work life. And this is definitely one of those career fields where you come to work, you put on the uniform, you take a breath, and it's like, okay, now I'm security forces. And then whenever you take it off, okay, now I'm a family man. I'm
sure
for my family and stuff. So
that kind of leads us into basically your story. So if you would, take us back to where all this kind of began, and we're kind of going to go through the steps that kind of to led you down this path that kind of, and it's timely, specifically this month as it's Suicide Awareness Month. But let's go back and kind of talk about the things that led you into your experiences with suicide.
I met a girl while I was overseas, and we got together whenever I came back home. And I didn't know that she had some mental health issues until later on, whenever she actually did try to commit suicide. And that's a pretty crazy story, in that I was actually working at Mason City Police Department whenever she started acting a little bit weird. And I knew that there was some signs of suicide from taking some of the courses here at the base.
Sure.
She was being very distanced, very always telling me that how much she loved me and how much she, loved her family and stuff like that. And I just got kind of a hint that something was off, just some of her actions and behaviors. And let me go back to this. All just started in one day. It wasn't like a slow build. Like the night before, everything was completely fine. I didn't have any inclination that she was suicidal at all until this day. And so I went home and I started trying to see where she was at. She wasn't wanting to tell me where she was at. She wasn't wanting to tell me anything, what was going on. And luckily I had her iPhone was through mine, so I was able to find it through a little phone tracker app. And I found out where she was at, and I was trying to see what was going on, and I couldn't determine whether it's has she been kidnapped or what was going on. I didn't know, so I called up the control center and told them what was going on, and they dispatched sheriff's deputies with me to go find her. So,
and at the time, you were a city policeman.
Yeah, I was a city policeman. I was, like I said, I was in full uniform. I'd just come off work. And the biggest thing with me is I didn't think she was trying to kill herself. I thought she had been kidnapped or something, because she was saying things I can't talk about it. I don't know what's going on and stuff. And I was trying to be on the phone with her, and I said, hey, if you're in danger, if you're being kidnapped, just say, just say like yes or no. Just say yes if you are and no if you're not. And she just said, yes. And so I thought, oh, okay, there was something going on.
Sure.
So that's why I called control and I was like, hey, can we get some sheriff's deputies down here to help me go out here and find her, because she was outside of my jurisdiction at this point. She was way outside of it. So we went down there and I was still in uniform, and whenever we came on the scene, a guy down there, it was on a farm, and he had said that he had heard a gunshot, and they found a suicide note inside the car. So everybody thought that she had already killed herself. And so, they took my gun and weapons belt and everything off, and was just like, hey, you have to come to the realization she's probably dead.
Wow, I can't imagine.
Yeah. So, and we had built a really strong relationship. Like I did. I cared about her. I loved her and stuff. And so I started, like breaking down a little bit,
Sure.
crying and stuff like that. And the next thing I know, she comes out of the woods. So it's like, well, she's not. I thought somebody else did it. So I was just like, was there somebody else down there? Like, what's going on?
Right.
Everybody was telling me that she was dead. Now she's right here. So ended up, she obviously didn't kill herself, but she had fired off a round to make sure the gun was still working before she did it. So from there, she went to St. Mary's and was diagnosed with depression, bipolar depression, anxiety, and manic bipolar disorder, which is basically like mania is where you go into little fits,
sure,
and things, and then come out of it and back into it randomly. So she was medicated and sent on her way.
So just to kind of, at the time, you were a city policeman, still serving, daily, and an Air National Guardsman. Yes. on top of that, and plus you're trying to live with this person who is having her own issues and helping her through. So please continue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, it's okay. But yeah, then this was literally, I came back from UAE in November, and this happened in, I believe, May or June. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that far away from whenever I just came back home too. But so she got diagnosed with that, came home, and was kind of taking her medication intermittently, and then she started to slip some more, and she started to slip into using different drugs. She always had a problem with pain pills because she was prescribed them at a very young age. She had a softball incident where she had broken her collarbone, and her supinator muscle was deteriorated, so she had actual disability. She has very limited range of motion in her in one of her arms. So she was prescribed medication very early on, and she started buying the stuff off the street again because she was complaining of the pain and stuff. And she tried to go get a prescription from a doctor, which they did give her, but she slowly started abusing it because, again, she had recovered from a heroin addiction before I had met her. Is one of the things. I don't think I said that earlier, but she was an addict in the past. It supposedly had been recovered. So she started slipping into the pain pills, and of course that led to other stuff, soon into opiates, and
which of course in this region is prevalent, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, anyways, I don't mean to jump back and
no, you're fine.
After the suicide attempt, and after the medication and the hospital visit, I was instructed to go to take 2 weeks off because it was a traumatic incident that happened, with the police, while I was a police officer, and I also had to go get a psychological evaluation. Sure. So I did that. Everything was fine. Cleared everything up, and I came back into work though, and they were like, "Hey, I don't know what you want to do, but the council members are pretty upset that we had to put you through this stuff, because apparently with small police departments like that, and other police departments, if you don't take the civil service exam, you're not considered civil service. You don't really have a union against you, because most big police departments, like, and I'm sure some cops, if they listen to this, would be like, this is crazy. How could they do that? Well, the not having civil service certification basically means that the town can hire you and fire you for any reason at all. They don't have to, if they don't like you, they can get rid of you.
Sure.
So, the chief sat me down and was just like, hey, the council's pretty upset with what we did. Apparently I was supposed to go to them about this funding, to having you psychologically evaluated. And I personally, and, my chief thought that was a bunch of crap, that he, that I needed it, that he was going to send me to it regardless. So he did, and they were upset with the entire situation. They were afraid, or, that she was going to do something like this again.
Sure.
And so they were just like, my chief was like, I know that you're trying to go to school and stuff like that, because at the time I was trying to go to college full time and stuff like that. And he was just like, maybe this would be a good time to put in like your resignation, because I'm telling you, if you go to the council meeting tonight, they're going to fire you. And that's going to look way worse on your record than if you just resign. So unfortunately, I had to resign. And it was basically because the council members were afraid that she was going to do something similar to this again, and that she was unpredictable. And they didn't like that I was out there in uniform out of jurisdiction. So not a couple days later, I had to resign from that position. And then I was unemployed for a while, and I had to get on unemployment, look for jobs. And at the time, the job market was really bad. I didn't have a degree. I couldn't hardly find a job anywhere. And luckily, I was picked up as a temporary technician here at the base. So I started working here at the base. Then I got a full-time job as a state employee here, and, was happy doing that. On the other hand, I started to slip back into the pills and into the opiates. So I was having to try to deal with that and her addiction, trying to get her into NA, Narcotics Anonymous.
So you two were living together at the time?
Yeah, we were living together, and it was just a constant battle.
Sure.
It was, and I found out now that I was in what's called a codependency loop, where she needed me to be codependent on her success. So what would happen, and what the loop is person that is addicted will start doing the addiction, start using drugs and things like that, and getting really bad. The codependent person, me, would start being like, hey, you need to stop, or else I'm going to leave, or you're going to be out of here. Addicted person would be like, I'm so sorry, I'm an addict, I need help. They'll go to get help for like a week or two. Everything will be good. I'll be really happy and stuff. And then slowly but surely, they'll start to slip back into the dependency and the addiction again.
Sure. And this wasn't a one-time thing.
It was over and over. It was like, and then I would address it, be like, hey, I'm going to leave if you don't get help. Okay, I'll go get help. Go get help for like 2 or 3 weeks. Everything's good. And then go back into being an addict again.
Sure.
It was just over and over and over again. And so, of course, she started meeting up with some bad people, and crazy things started happening at the house, where she was leaving at all hours of the night. She was taking the car. I couldn't keep my wallet out, because I would wake up and there'd be $100, $200 missing from my account. She would go out and buy drugs with it in the middle of the night and stuff. So I was having to deal with that, and still working full time.
Sure.
And on top of that, I was also trying to promote myself and level up here.
Sure.
So I went and did the Army's Best Warrior Challenge, which that year I actually won it with another airman of mine, which he's left now.
But now the Best Warrior Challenge, that's basically it's a day or 2 day.
It's a 3-day event that the Army puts on, and it's basically just like 3 days of absolute like heck.
Right. It's very, very intensive, like mentally and physically.
Yeah. There's, stuff like there's an obstacle course. There's a 7-mile ruck race with a 45-pound pack. There is a range day where you do stuff from firing to disassembling, reassembling weapons, setting up landmines, doing buddy drags and things, calling for fire.
Now, was this the first time that they had actually allowed Air Guard members in the? Okay.
Yeah, and different things like night land nav, like that was a crazy experience for me because I was decent at land navigation, but at night it's like complete pitch black.
Sure.
You're up there,
especially at Camp Dawson.
Yeah, and you're up there in the mountains, and it's just like it was just crazy. But then going through that. And then coming home to the same stuff that I was having to deal with.
Sure.
And further along the line, I did a combat leadership course, which is a month-long course for security forces members, which is basically how to be a leader, and not just that, but like be able to lead in combat, it teaches you how to do land nav more effectively, do a ruck more effectively, how to prep for combat, how to write an op order and a warning order, how to get your troops ready to go to do combat missions, how to run patrols and operations and things. Really awesome course for security forces members. It's really awesome course. While I was going through that, I was also having to deal with her, and apparently while I was gone, like, she had gotten into some bad business with a drug dealer, and I apparently sold somebody some fake stuff that I wasn't aware of, and they had actually knocked her out on our front porch, beat her up, and then stole my only car, stole it. So she actually had to get a couple of friends of hers to go back and beat those guys up and steal it again. It's like a Grand Theft Auto thing, and it's like a story, it's just crazy.
It's hard to believe that it actually happened.
Yeah.
Sure.
And so I had a couple things that got stolen from mine. Like my dad had gave me a really nice sleeping bag and some gear that was stolen from me, and I still haven't recovered it. It was just gone. I've had my guitar. It was whenever I came home, it was gone.
Sure.
Amplifier was gone, guitar was gone. Her dad had gave us a couple $1,000s of some nice DeWalt tools, all gone, and he's stolen. So I got done with combat leaders course, and I was coming home to that. It's just like, what in the world? And after I'd come back and things were still going in the wrong direction. So I finally gave her an ultimatum, and I talked to her dad about it, and her dad was just like, you can't, it's just like raising a child. You can't just threaten to punish the child.
Sure.
They're never going to learn. If you just keep threatening and you never act upon it, they're just going to keep doing it. So if you're going to say you're going to do something, you need to do it. So I finally was just like, if you don't get help, I'm going to leave you. And that's that. And I had later on, after that statement, she had agreed to go to therapy in Tennessee, which before she had left, I had found out that she was cheating on me. But I told her, I said, if you go get help and everything gets straightened out, I'll forgive you for it and we'll be fine.
Sure.
So she went to therapy in Tennessee, and that was like a month-long thing.
Well, that was like a rehab kind of.
Yeah, it was a rehabilitation for like a month, and statistically, most addicts don't get better unless it's like a 6-month program. So after the month, she was really wanting to come out. So I had a feeling in the back of my mind that it was just going to go south again.
Sure.
Which it did. She came back, and within like 2 weeks, I had an incident where I was trying, like at this time also, before Best Warrior, before Combat Leaders course, I started going to school for at West Virginia State University.
So you're training for
Best Warrior. I'm doing Combat Leaders course. I'm in school full time, which 12 credit hours a semester.
Sure.
Like not online, actually going to school every day and doing all this and still trying to maintain, Dean's List, which I was successful in doing, maintaining the Dean's List all through that time. And at the same time, I'm taking her to rehab in Tennessee. She's coming back, and in my the first week of school, first day, this is going into after she had came back from rehab. The part that she screwed up on was she took the car, because I trusted her. I let her have the car, and she said, "Okay, I'll be back before you have to go to school in the morning." She took it at like 7:00 at night. Did not come back until noon the next day. Mm-hmm. And I was already late for school, and I said, "This is it. I'm done." So filed for divorce, kicked her out of the house. And, that's whenever my, realization of everything started to come in. So a couple months down the line, still going to school and doing everything, I started just, I started into like running more, coming towards the end of the year and stuff.
Doing things that like we talk about as far as like things that are like meant to build your resiliency, exercise, like those
exercise things. And meditation. I was doing that, and I started training for a half marathon, and I was doing that for months, visiting family and stuff. And then I started to push it more and more, to that eventually led to me getting injury in my knee, iliotibial band syndrome, which is just a really bad syndrome in your knee, where the muscle and fascia kind of gets really inflamed, and it can, almost cripple you for about a month. And it did me. Like, it was hard for me to walk or do anything for about a month, 2 months. So that's whenever everything started to come in, because I was just like, crap, now I can't just run from everything.
Right. So your main coping mechanism was kind of gone.
Yeah, it was literally just to run from it. You know what I mean? I started thinking about it as just take off, let's go on a 5-10 mile run. It's fun.
And to circle back just a little bit, like I know you had mentioned before at one point that you had to revive her with Narcan from an overdose. Yeah.
And that was another experience that had happened to me. It wasn't like, okay, it happened here, but I live over here. This all happened in my house.
Sure.
This was all in the same place. So one of the things I had to walk by every single day was a busted solid wood interior door. And the reason why it was busted is because whenever she was using again, there was one day she had gone to the bathroom and locked herself in the bathroom. And so, it was fine, whatever, people, give her privacy or whatever.
Sure.
But it had been like 45 minutes, and me knowing her habits, I was just like, something's not right.
Sure.
So I started listening, and I could hear her like stumbling around and yelling and moaning and stuff, which is what she would do because with her mental condition, where whenever she does opiates and things, she doesn't, especially heroin like she was using, it's not just like she falls asleep or whatever like some people do. She literally turns into like this zombie type person that will yell and moan and flail around, and it's just like somebody that's basically acting like a zombie, like literally. And so I heard that, and I heard her fall into the bathtub. And where my house was a 2-story house, I did not have a ladder big enough to reach up to that window that was in the bathroom. So I knew something was wrong, and I didn't hear her moving anymore, so I had to get in there. So I had to actually kick down the door to break in there and pick her up out of the bathtub, set her on the floor. And I had to go into her bedroom and get her, she kept Narcan in her dressing room. So I got that, I hit her with that, and nothing was happening. She was still just like gasping for breath, like death rattle and everything. So I was just like, crap. So I called 911, and everybody showed up, and a couple of the people that showed up, one one of the guys was actually a guy that I worked with in Mason Police Department. So it's really embarrassing for me.
Sure.
Because I had everybody there that knew me, basically throughout my career had seen me.
Sure.
And they were reviving her, bringing her out, and they were all just looking at me like, man, what are you doing with her? Why are you doing this? And the only way I could explain it to somebody is it's like, if your child was an addict, you would not give up on
Sure, you would do whatever you could.
Yeah. And that's what it felt like to me.
Sure.
She stopped feeling like a person that I was in a relationship with to a person that I was just trying to keep alive and to have and to, keep going. Like, she became more of a sister to me than an actual person in the end. And so, yeah, she had, gotten her revived from that. And literally, like, they did that and I had to get dressed and go to work. Now I didn't tell anybody about this stuff, so nobody knew this stuff was going on.
When you say no one, you're talking about the guard, us, the 130th had no idea. Nobody
at the guard had any idea because I didn't want to talk about it because I was embarrassed about it.
Sure, and that's like that. That is the stigma of guardsmen is we don't want to, like, that whole looming thing of like, I don't want all of these personal issues like affecting my career at the guard.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I didn't want to bring my home life to work.
Sure.
So I would, I went to work and everything, everybody thought everything was fine and nothing was going on. And even after all this stuff and I had told everybody about this, they were like, man, we had no idea.
So now leading into that, so you'd had all these experience with your, I guess now at this time, ex-wife. Mm-hmm. You had lost the one coping mechanism that you had, which was, running. Yeah. And so kind of go into how, like, basically it was like what happened next.
Yeah. So, like I said, everything that happened in this house that I was living in.
Sure.
And so I was walking through, constantly being reminded of different things that had happened, all the time. And so, I go into a room and I can remember different situations, different things that happened. I, remember going into the living room and seeing drugs or whatever laying there. I go upstairs into the bathroom and see that kicked in bathroom door every day. Like,
sure.
It was always there. So as things went on and I couldn't really work out anymore and I was trying to recover, I was going to physical therapy and, trying to get better. I started having these moments where it was just like, man, yoga and meditation seems to be all right, but something's still amiss. I'm still feeling gray. I'm still feeling a little bit gloomy. So then I thought to myself, you know what? Like, you get sick, you get hurt, you go to the doctor to get treatment. I'm going to go to a psychologist, see if there's something here, with me. And I didn't tell anybody, like I said, I didn't tell anybody any of this.
Yeah, this was all of your own personal volition.
Yeah. So at the time I got an AGR job during this whole time that I was going through all this stuff.
Sure.
And so I had TRICARE and I went to a therapist and I started seeing a therapist and there I was diagnosed with, she diagnosed me with post-traumatic stress disorder because people think PTSD and they think, oh, you had to go to a war zone.
Right. You were in combat.
You were in combat or something. But it can happen more reasons than that. Like, for instance, if, somebody, rapes you or somebody has, mugs you out in the street or even like violent car accidents, experiences, like mine, like where you've had to go, like literally live in this crap for so long.
Sure.
It can all reverberate to symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. And if you look at the actual wording of it, it's something that it's a traumatic experience that you have experienced through. And this is the the post or after repercussions of having that traumatic experience.
Right. And we talk about a lot in the Guard about wingmen, and, we talk about resiliency, and like you had done everything right. You were doing, you were doing the things that we talk about to like try to build resiliency, exercising those things. And like you still fell into these things. And I feel like that's a really important, point to make, that like, maybe you should have reached out, but regardless of that, you were doing everything right.
Yeah. And like I had even, started going to church and things like that and doing all that stuff. And I'll say this too, like some people can go through what I went through and, they can do the resiliency things and they can get through it and everything be fine. They don't have to go to therapy. They don't have to do any of that. Everybody is different though. Like some people, are just, everybody's built genetically different. Everybody has different viewpoints on life and stuff. It's just like with sports. Some guys can play football until they're, 45, 50.
Sure.
Other guys, they're at 35, 30, 32, 33, they're done, Some guys can lift huge amounts of weights all their life. Some guys, have to slow it down whenever they get older. And I'm talking like that because I have a bachelor's in exercise science too.
Sure.
So that's how I equate these things with mental health. It's kind of like the same thing with exercise. And with mental health, in my, limited viewpoint of it, is like I was saying, some people, are born and they can get through all this stuff, and they can just run it out and everything's fine, and that
sure,
they have good genetics and they can just go through it without any therapy. Everybody's different though. Like with me, I tried these different things and I was still feeling like something was missing or something was a little bit off.
Sure.
And being an NCO, I thought to myself, okay, if I'm not operating at my 100%, if I can't be honest about what happened, if I can't be honest with myself and I have to keep secrets from everybody,
sure, then
how am I expecting my airmen that I'm bringing up to do what they're supposed to do, and telling me about these things and being honest with me and going to seeking help if I can't even do that myself?
Sure.
How am I supposed to give them 100% if I'm not at 100%?
Of course.
So started going to therapy, and that's whenever I was, diagnosed with what they diagnosed me with, and I started the treatment process. And one of the things that I noticed, first off, and one of the main reasons I started going to therapy too, wasn't just because of the feelings and emotions that I was having, but it was also because I had a lot of physical symptoms too. And physical symptoms for me manifested in like horrible stomach cramps and bloating and gas and just like horrible like experiences with my gut. Like I would wake up and no matter what I ate, it would just give me horrible gas all day.
Sure.
And if I would eat nothing, it would still tear me up on the inside. Like it was just literally, I had the symptoms of irritable bowel syndrome. I went to the doctor. They had ran several blood tests on me to check everything. They gave me an antacid pill. The blood test came back, everything was fine. Antacid pill worked for, a couple of weeks, and then it started coming back again. So then, I talked to the doctor more about it. He's like, well, it could be something psychological. So I said, okay, well, I was thinking about going to therapy anyways.
Sure.
So let's try that. And as soon as I started going, within 2 or 3 weeks of therapy, my stomach issues and stuff just vanished. Like it was just incredible. It was just gone. And, that time, no medication or anything for it. It was just great. So went through therapy, and whenever I went through therapy, because I have TRICARE, it alerted my commanders.
Sure.
And
so the dreaded, the secret got out.
Yeah. So they had brought me in and were just like, what in the world is this? You're diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Like, what is going on? Like,
sure. And
I told them everything that happened, and they were just like, oh my gosh, we had no idea. Like, yeah, that's pretty crazy and everything. So I, started going through the process of being put on the do not arm list. And so I was just like, oh, shoot, I might have to start looking for another job.
Right.
and stuff, and I might have to just do something else I didn't know.
And so like for a security forces member, an inability to carry a firearm is kind of like,
yeah, it's a big deal, because obviously everything we do, we arm up every day.
Sure.
We can't do our job effectively without having that tool. It's a last option, last defense tool, but it's also a psychological tool too.
Sure.
It deters people from doing anything they're not supposed to, and it helps us keep our assets safe if, God forbid, we'd ever have to use them.
Sure.
But so, yeah, that was one of the things. And I was just like, well, what's going to happen now? I didn't know. And they ended up, so I got put on the do not arm list, and I had to start working in the emergency control center, because that's one of our limited posts where you don't have to carry a firearm in. Because you're basically just like a civilian emergency controller, and you're just dispatching forces, taking phone calls. And
so what is your mindset like at this time? Like, you're put on the do not arm list. Like, were you actively thinking like, I'm going to have to go somewhere else? Like, I'm going to have to find a new career and start all over.
Yeah. And that's literally what I thought. Like, I was making plans of being a career, like, I call it a career student, because you're just at school all the time.
Sure.
And I was like, I'll just go to physical therapy at Marshall or something. I'll start doing that, and I'll just be, a career student, and I'll just be, that. So I was just making all these plans and thinking to myself, like, what in the world can I do? And so then they started talking to me more about it, and they were just like, no, you're not going to lose your job. No, we're not going to do that.
So, and then we're talking about the leadership at the, Security Forces Squadron.
Yeah. And I addressed it with leadership, and they addressed it with me, and they were just like, well, nothing's going to happen. You're a great asset to us. You're an example for, a lot of these people here, and, we love you here, and we're going to take care of you. And I was just like, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I feel like that limits people to actually coming forward with these kind of personal issues too, is that assumption that leadership does not have their back.
Yeah.
And it's really nice to hear stories of, the organization coming to someone's side.
Yeah. And like, so I was just like, man, that's really awesome that they would help me through this stuff and all that. So started the process, getting the documentation in and things. And, we were working through it, and, I had to get evaluated by our psychological health professional here, which is Melinda Himstedt, and she's great. She, gave me some insights and tips on different things. I only saw her one time, continued with my therapy, and things continued to improve. Mm-hmm. And then eventually my therapist had cleared me of the post-traumatic stress disorder. They said, she was like, it's not having a detrimental effect on him anymore, and he's stable and in good condition. So most mental health profiles, you have to be on a profile, or it's recommended that you're on a profile for 6 months. Mm-hmm. Your commander can sign a waiver and take you off of it, I believe, earlier than 6 months if they are willing to accept the risk. But of course, like, especially in my career field, most commanders and stuff, they're not going to, because you're giving this guy a gun every day.
Sure.
You don't want to take that risk. If medical doesn't think that it's safe, then they're going to keep you on a profile. So I sat through, and I recovered mentally for 6 months. And that's how I saw it as.
Sure.
And one of the goals that I had for myself was, I'm not going to let this house haunt me. I sold it eventually, like a year later, sold it in 2019. But while I was going through this profile, which, I did 4 or 5 months before I sold the house, I was on this profile, and, I started to come to terms with everything that happened. And I can say, whenever I sold the house, like, I actually miss it now.
Sure.
Because I looked at it for what it was, and a beautiful home and stuff. And it was built in the 1930s, original hardwood floors and everything, just a really beautiful older house. And, I loved it. And that's how I wanted to leave it. I didn't want to leave it as someplace horrible.
Sure.
Because I didn't want that, like, I didn't want some inanimate object to get any kind of control over me or how I thought of it or how I saw it, you know. So I wanted to come to terms with it, and I did. And same thing with everything else that happened. You know, I eventually came to terms with it. Everything happened the way it happened, and it's over with now.
So looking back over the experience, like what would you have changed that may have like not led you to the do not arm list? If you could go back, would you change anything that you did?
I don't think so. No, I don't have any regrets about being on the do not arm list, because it made me stronger as a person. Sure. And it made me more resilient because, you know, I'm not going to lie, I got bored. I got frustrated being in the emergency control center all day because it's literally at the time it was up in the fire department. It's a box a little bit bigger than this.
Sure.
You know, so it's not very big. And it's always dark in there, and nobody ever comes in there because it's a controlled center,
sure,
controlled area, and it's just, you know, just you and a computer and a TV. And me being an active individual, I was just like, I'm sitting here all day and I'm just wasting away, you know?
Sure. And being in a career field where you're like either like out in a vehicle or like out doing something constantly, that's got to be awful.
Yeah. Which, not saying anything bad about office workers or anything, because, you know, I mean, my wife's one of them.
Sure.
But I'm just not that type of person that can just sit and be on a computer all day. You know, I don't like that. And that's another reason why I chose the exercise science bachelor degree that I have now, is just because I like getting up and moving around and showing people how to do things. And so I came to terms with that as well, though. You know, I did things like I brought an exercise ball in there and I just used that on my free time. You know, if I wasn't doing something, I would do some little exercises in there. I would do yoga in there, and I would do, you know, different things like that. Just came to terms with it.
Sure.
And eventually I was taken off of it. And whenever I was through the process, you know, I actually met my wife through going through all this stuff too.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So after the profile and everything, we started talking. We really clicked. And, you know, things moved a little bit quick, but we got together, and now we've got a baby that's coming in
that's awesome.
November.
Congratulations. Yeah. So what would you say to individuals going through like some heavy stuff like you did personally? Like, what advice would you give them?
Just to keep your head up, and to know that anything that's happening today is going to be a memory tomorrow, and that anything that's happening today, you know, can affect tomorrow in a positive or negative way. So if you wanted to start changing the way things are now, you have to take the first step. You have to take the initial step, and you can't lie to yourself and say that everything's just going to get better without anybody's help, because it's not. You have to be the one to initiate the action to get better. And whether that's doing something more resilient, like exercising, or looking into meditation, which has really helped me, or looking into yoga, which has also really, really helped me, or going to church and getting some spiritual peace with your God. Whatever it is, you need to take those first initial steps, because nobody else is going to do it for you. And you can't expect somebody else to do it for you, because if you feel pressured, if you feel like somebody is just shoving stuff down your throat,
sure,
most people are just going to not take that, you know. And if you're one of those people that knows somebody that's going through something and needs help, you can direct them to places, but you can't lead a horse to water and expect it to drink, you know.
Of course.
Like, they have to take that initial step. And if it's not them truly taking that initial step, it's just like with dealing with somebody that's an addict or anything else. If they're not the one that wants to get better, they're not going to get better. So if you're going through stuff now and you need you need help and guidance, just know that if you're in the National Guard too, like, it's not the end of the world. It's not the end of a career. I'm still employed. I'm still, and some of this stuff doesn't go away. Like, I still deal with stuff every now and then.
Sure.
And life has different stressors, like obviously having a baby and COVID and everything else.
Of course.
This year is a big stressor, and I used to be a single guy with no kids, and now I have a 5-year-old that I look after and one on the way. So it's like my life has changed immensely in the past year, which is a couple stressors that I'm going through now that I'm having to deal with.
So as an NCO, what has your experience kind of like enlightened you to, like, when you're dealing with junior enlisted members, like what has this taught you as far as like understanding the people that work under you?
Well, I mean, I always bring it as like, I tell them my experience, because if somebody is going through something right now and they hear my experience, I've personally had people open up to me just because I've told them my story, just because they know that I've went through something, because there's this weird thing that happens whenever somebody goes through a traumatic event. At least this is how I saw it as, is like, whenever I went through what I went through, one of the reasons I didn't want to talk to a lot of people about it was because I thought to myself that I was like, I had went through this stuff. That person hasn't went through this stuff. So that person is like an infant, and I have this experience. They don't, so they're not going to understand it. Why am I even going to talk to them?
Sure.
They're just an innocent child still because they haven't went through this stuff. So I always like to tell them my experience so that if they have that, they can feel more comfortable in talking, and it's very naive to think that way, and that just because you haven't had a traumatic experience means that, you're not as an experienced individual. I can't talk to you. That's a very immature way to look at things, but that's the way it happens sometimes. Everybody responds to these things differently, and everybody has different outlooks, and a traumatic experience can change you. It can take that innocent, kid that we once used to be and turn him into a hardened person.
Sure.
And just because you have changed doesn't mean that you've lost that innocence that you once had. You just have to rediscover it, and you have to come to terms with what's happened. And everybody acts differently whenever they go through this stuff. Some people, display different signs and symptoms. Some people just get an urge to do everything and anything, and they want to go out and they want to drive their cars super fast down the interstate or go skydiving and do these other adrenaline junkie stuff because they like that high, because it distracts them from their current situation. Or like with me, become a workaholic, want to work out all the time so that they don't have to think about it ever.
Sure.
It's always a distraction. Other people will just sit and fall into a depression. Like, there's multiple ranges of people that act different ways, which is why I like telling people my story, because no matter who they are, they know, okay, that person's been through some stuff, and maybe I don't like working out all the time, or maybe I am scared that I'm going to die if I go skydiving, but I don't know why I'm doing it still.
Sure.
Maybe I should go talk to this guy because he might, I've been through something similar, or vice versa. So I always like to tell them about it, and I always encourage people to get help because there's a quality of life aspect to it. And, my doctor talked to me about this not too long ago too. It's like, there's a quality of life aspect to it, to where, do you want to just work and be miserable and live in this for however long, or do you want to get better and have good relationships with people?
Sure.
And, if you have a family, get those relationships better, or, improve upon those, and, be the best person that you can be, for everyone else around you. So
let me first say thank you for sharing your experience with us. And then I'd like to leave the last word up to you. Is there anything else that like we haven't really touched on that you would like to impart to our listeners?
Just going back on the same stuff, man. Like, everybody goes through stuff in their life, and everybody not everybody has such a high threshold for trauma. Like some people at a traumatic event can be like I said, getting into a violent car accident with like your child in the back or something. That could become something traumatic. You know what I mean? Like if you legitimately thought maybe you were going to die, or maybe your child was going to get injured or something, that can be super traumatic.
Sure.
Other people will look at that and be like, oh, that wasn't that bad. Because, you know, X, Y, and Z, or, you know, this person did that or the other and they survived. Or some people will have that high threshold to where, you know, they only experience only think of a traumatic event, or only have those symptoms of PTSD whenever they go through something, if they go through something like combat or something like that.
Sure.
So there's different levels, and there's nothing like saying that, oh, because this person can handle this much more, they're tougher, they're more resilient, or oh, because this person couldn't handle this, they're not that resilient or stuff. It's like, it doesn't matter, because when it's about you. And the thing that I've learned through going through what I've been through and stuff is it doesn't matter if this person can go through this and you can't go through this. It's what you go through yourself that matters. It's being able to love yourself and be at peace with yourself. And if for some reason, like what you went through is making you upset and is really aggravating you and stuff, you should go get treatment for that. Because at the end of the day, it's you. It's not what everybody else thinks.
Sure.
It's not it's not something that's going to be written on your tombstone whenever you die. You know, it's not something that anybody else is probably going to even talk about. It's you. And I don't mean to sound selfish, but nobody else cares but about you, but yourself, and maybe your parents and things like that and other loved ones. Like, they're the only ones that care.
Sure.
So if you need help, regardless of what it's for, just accept that you need help and go get it. And it's going to make a world of a difference. You're going to feel so much better about yourself. You're going to be able to accomplish more goals than you've ever been able to before. You're going to have a brighter outlook on life, and you're going to see things that you haven't been able to do. You're going to either change your outlook and be able to do those things, or you're going to come to terms with it and you're going to be comfortable. You're not going to lie awake at night thinking about things all the time. You're not going to want to have constant attention coming to you all the time, constant reaffirmation that you're doing the right thing, because you're going to be at peace with yourself, and you're going to be able to know, okay, I love myself and I'm okay with everything that's happened. And I love every decision I've made, good or bad, because that was my decision and it's me. So.
Well, awesome, man. Thank you again for your time.
Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
On the podcast now, we have Director of Psychological Health, Melinda Himstedt, and she's going to talk to us about some signs and symptoms of someone in distress.
Today, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about looking out for the ones that we care about, our friends. We sometimes don't pay attention to the little signs, but distress comes in many different forms. It's not just one issue. It can be multiple issues at a time, or it could be one issue that has blown out of proportion. So when you're working with people, or you're even with your family and your friends, if you notice any changes in their mood or their behavior, they could either be happy one minute and then all of a sudden depressed, or vice versa. They could be normally a person that's not always happy and giddy and turn around and be happy. You might want to pay a little bit more close attention to them. Sometimes you want to also pay attention to the way their engagement and their motivation, and if there are changes in their behavior of not wanting to go out and do the normal things that they used to do with you. When we care about people, we want to make sure that we pay attention to these warning signs, because it can mean that there's possibly more underlying issues, and that we kind of need to seek out the help to get our family and our friends and our coworkers connected to the right people to help them deal with the stressors.
So speaking of resources and people that can help, can you tell us some of the resources that we have here at the 130th that if we see a fellow airman that is in distress, that we can contact or have them contact?
Yes, most definitely. You can reach out and you can contact myself, the DPH. My extension is 341-6516. Most definitely, you can connect through the Air Force Connect app. Just make sure you don't share any personal information if you just want to have me give you a call. We also have our full-time chaplain, which is Major Brian Knight, and you can reach him at 341-6340. And on drill weekends, we have our Lieutenant Colonel Bob McDonough, and you can reach him at 341-6147. You can also reach out to Beth Melton, our Airman Family and Readiness. These are the 3 major people on base. But if you also want to connect to other resources, we have Military One Source. We also have the Warriors for Hope. We also have the state number, the National Hotline for Suicide. And if you were to call that one, 1-800-273-8255, you can actually talk to someone. And if you have any mood changes or just need to reach out and to talk to somebody, that's a great number to call.
And like Sergeant McCormick, that's not just a military source. That's for anybody.
That's for anybody, yes. That's for anybody that wants to call. It doesn't have to be for the person that's in distress. It could be for someone that cares about someone in distress. It's just a number that you can also reach out to.
So, and this being the close of September, which was Suicide Awareness Month, and starting in October, is there anything else you'd like to leave us with as far as like thinking about other people's well-being and just being conscious of other people?
Yes, and keep in mind that even though this was Suicide Awareness Month for September, we should really pay attention and not just focus one month out of the year. Moving forward, you want to always stay connecting. Connect to Protect is actually the slogan that we're utilizing this year for making connections with people. Those connections are what will actually help prevent and reduce the risk of harm for individuals who are thinking about suicide. If you were able just to reach out if someone you haven't talked to in a while, or make a connection that way. And looking forward when the upcoming holidays, it's not easy for everybody. So especially during this COVID-19, you want to utilize those resources. Another free app that you could also utilize, it's on Android and the iPhone, is the COVID Coach. It has a lot of great resources, and it also has helpful links for resources in our area as well.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Melinda, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And that's going to do it for this episode of The Drop. For more information about the 130th Airlift Wing, visit us on the web at www.130aw.ang.af.mil. Additionally, you can find us on all major social media platforms. Lastly, you can see us in the skies delivering freedom with courage. This is Master Sergeant Eugene Christ reminding you to stay ready to go.